Welcome to the Leader More podcast. Our motive is to pass on what we've found helpful over the years through leading teams, running operations, and dealing with life's challenges. We hope you enjoy. Talking mindsets and particularly how we treat ourselves, that internal voice. What do you call it?
The dialogue. What do I call it? I just call it the internal voice, the dialogue in my head.
Bob?
No, not for me personally. It's funny though that you call it Bob. Yeah, so when we talk about mindsets, what I like to think about is just that dialogue you have in your own head about what you're doing, maybe how you are as a person. And, it's often a little bit more negative in a lot of cases than it should be.
Well, we spoke about that last episode where we were saying, okay, well, when you're in an environment and there's lots of opportunity for talk, I just threw out 50%, right, is the mark. And you mentioned that, hey, I reckon it's going to be more than 50%, which I agree with you, right?
His bias is, I think, what you're referring to, where we tend to focus on the bad more than the good. And I think that is absolutely true in our own minds as well.
Yeah. What percentage-wise, what would you say that yours is negative to positive?
Oh, mine. Thank you. I thought you were going to say population. I was like, don't get me to do this. In my own head, look, it is way better than it used to be. About 8 years ago, it was about 90% negative, 10% positive.
Okay.
Nowadays, I'm about 50-50, which is pretty good. But I am really good at catching myself out on the negative as well. Like every time I have a negative thought, I'm like, what? Oh, is that true? Like, what's the evidence to support that? And that really does help in terms of like pushing myself in the direction of this idea that, well, with mindsets, you can have a bad mindset and it doesn't really do anything for you. And this is going to sound delusional, but I think that no matter what your ability actually is, you should always go into something with a positive mindset.
But I imagine you didn't think that 8 years ago by the sounds of it.
Oh no, I was like, I would outwardly lie and say, I'm awesome. And then in my head, I was going, wow, you're a bloody loser.
Okay.
Kill yourself.
Why the change? Probably why and then how? Like,
okay, so
what worked for you?
The change for me was actually there was, it all came together for me in one go with a group of people. I had a good doctor, I had a good boss at the time, and then I had a good friend at the time. Yeah. And like each one of those things contributed to like the building of my confidence and me going, oh wait, I'm not such a bad person. Like I've got this friend that I always thought that I would never have. I've got this boss telling me that I'm like super awesome and cool. Yeah. And my doctor's telling me that all these things that I'm saying about myself are like completely wrong and invalidated. It was not something that I did by myself. And admittedly, if you're not as bad as I was in my own head, you can get out of a bad mindset yourself by just changing the language in your head from positive to negative. But in some cases, when you're too far in, you're too deep, you don't have that option and you do need external help to pull you out, because there's no way you're going to convince yourself that you're this awesome person who's capable of things.
Yeah, so it seems like what you're saying is that the data points that you were getting from 3 other sources, and I imagine you were achieving some stuff or you were contributing in a way to be able to get that sort of...
yeah.
You still doubt it? So there's probably 4 aspects there. Those data outputs didn't match the one internal voice, right? So that started to overpower it.
Yeah, exactly. And
so environment and the people that you're surrounded by were the big contributors?
Yeah, absolutely. And after you have that little pushing point, well, then you can start to do it, just work on yourself and go, well, I've actually got experience in my own, background of, I would tell myself these things that aren't true. So it's really easy to then push back on this dialogue in your own head where you go, I can't do this because I grew up in Armidale and I'm poor and stupid, right? But then I go, oh, but I've had it, like I know from experience that this dialogue has been wrong and other people have told me otherwise. And then from that, I can just go, okay, I feel this way. I'm going to acknowledge that I feel this way, but I'm going to ignore it and try anyway. I have an interesting story about this of someone, like a group that were in an office I was working at one point, and one of them was, he played footy when he was younger and he was looking to get back into it. And there were a couple of voices in the office, and one in particular was telling him, no, don't do it. Like, you're going to suck. You don't go back into it. I mean, just overhearing, I thought it was like, you know, a bit rude. And I thought, well, there's no evidence to suggest he's going to go back into footy and he's going to suck or not. Like, he hasn't done it. So, you know, you're just predicting shit based on nothing. So, like, I had a conversation with him and I said, look, ignore that guy. Whether or not you suck or not, it doesn't matter. If you adopt his view on things that you're going to suck, like, don't do it, you're just never going to do it and you'll never find out. Even if it's delusional, just tell yourself, I'm going to do a good job. At least in that case, you're going to commit to it and you're going to go there and you're going to give it a go. And there's a good chance, based on the fact that you've played before, that you'll actually do quite well. Maybe you're not going to do well, but at least give yourself that chance to do so.
Yeah, push out of your comfort zone, right?
Yeah.
There's so many different, I suppose, frameworks you'd call them, you know, closed and open mindset, growth mindset, above the line, below the line. The four that I like, the comfort zone, the fear zone, the learning zone, and the growth zone, and just how we stick into our comfort zone. It's like, as humans, we are wired just to stick in that spot.
Yeah.
Everything in your brain and soul and your bones is telling you, no, do not do it. Stay there. Like, what the hell are you doing? Right. And it could be for like basic things like getting up out of bed early, or there's so many times where that sort of pops up.
Yeah.
So getting into footy. So what happened?
I thought to myself, you know what? I'm going to give this a shot. I always told myself when I was a kid that I was like a little nerd who was into playing with electronics and video games. But actually I'd always like wanted to play team sports. So lo and behold, I did a little bit of reality testing and I tested my own mindset theory in real life. And I told myself, you know what? I'm going to give this a go. I am going to do well. I rock up and the internal dialogue in my head is still there. It's telling me, oh, you're going to make a fool of yourself. You're going to be awkward. You're going to embarrass yourself. But I persevered anyway. And I did learn something from it. And that was that, you know, the footy population isn't as bad as I thought it was, because all these other guys who I'm playing with are like reaffirming me. They're telling me I'm doing a good job. They're helping me out when I'm failing and
encouraging you.
Yeah. And it's this weird dynamic of, well, in my own head, I'm so like afraid of embarrassing myself and looking bad and being awkward and being perceived as awkward, when in reality, like, there's just this group of guys who are like, who want me to succeed.
What was your initial thought, like, going into it? You said you were surprised. Like, what were you expecting?
Oh, just a bunch of fuckwits. But of course I would hold that opinion, because no matter what demographic you're in, you always
nerd.
Yeah, the enemy is always the opposite. You know, like, if you're in the footy group, you go, well, those bloody nerds, just, you know, stupid virgins. And then, like, if you're in the nerds, you're like, well, those guys are just like dickheads. But actually, there's just a bunch of wonderful people on both sides, and it was
human beings, right?
Yeah, and it was like a
surprise. Yeah.
And at least, like, although I didn't stick to it because it actually wasn't my forte.
Yeah.
I did get to learn that from that experience, and just that like manifestation in reality of that, well, this is what was going on in my head, and then this is what a group of people are telling me. Just realizing that was like very nice for me.
You like that point around the data points and what you're, you know, what you're actually seeing in reality compared to the voice in your head.
Yeah.
And it's like we have this thing where the voice is there, it's from within us, so it must be true. There's got to be this battle that we don't probably realize until we get a little bit older, I suppose, of, hey, you do not have to listen to that voice.
Yeah.
Like, you can push back, you can do different things. Sometimes you do need to listen to that voice. Like, you know, don't run out in front of that traffic or do something dumb like that. But the vast majority of the time, it's just trying to keep you in that comfort zone. And I suppose psychologically and animal brain wise, it's all to do with survival.
One of my favorite analogies of this being in your comfort zone and this whole idea of the animal brain is the idea of the turtle crossing the road. Stop me if you've heard this one.
No.
I don't know if I made this up or if I read this somewhere, but
I heard the chicken one crossing the road.
You're a turtle crossing the road. and there's bloody 18 wheels of steel coming down Roe Highway. If you're a turtle, what do?
Well, you bug it either way.
Yeah,
You
but
can't
as a
never-
turtle,
yeah.
you use your animal brain, you go into your comfort zone, you go into your shell.
Yeah.
Now,
Okay.
is that going to protect you from the 18 wheels of steel? No, it's going to crush you either way. What the turtle needs to do there is just skedaddle across the road and make it across the road. Go against what its instincts are telling it is correct and just shoot across to survive. And this, like, I feel like this happens so much in our own lives where we're put in a moment where we instinctively collapse into ourselves and go into this protective moment where what we should be doing is running across the road. And it's hard to catch in the moment because it is instinctive, which is why I said earlier, sometimes you can get yourself out of this trap yourself just by catching yourself on these thoughts. But sometimes you're in so deep that there is nothing you can do in the moment, and you do need external help.
Wind back the clock 8 years. You got into an environment where it was supportive and you had people that believed in you and, you know, and that contradicted probably their voice. At that point, were you like, whatever the inner voice tells you goes, and there's not even a thought process?
Well, here's the thing, is I was doing like work on myself at the time as well. And a part of the work I was doing on myself was every time I feel that sense of I'm not good enough or I feel anxious about something, I'm going to write it down.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of a cliche, write down your feelings and stuff, but this is exactly what I did. I would write down what I was doing and what my beliefs were about what I was doing. And this is known in the business as cognitive behavioral therapy, which you can self-administer if you like. I write down what I was doing. I write down the beliefs of what I was doing. And then I write down the consequences of my belief. And I would do this every time I had one of these moments.
Yeah.
And I would sit there and I would challenge each of my beliefs. So if the thing that I was doing was that I had to talk in front of a room and my beliefs were, I'm going to make a fool of myself. People are going to think I'm a fraud. And then like, what are the consequences of these beliefs? Well, I go into it nervous. I'm more likely to make mistakes. Maybe I don't even do the speech. Maybe I like call in sick.
You're reaffirming, setting yourself up for failure.
Yeah. So then what I do is I look at all these beliefs and I go, well, you know what? I'm going to challenge every one of these. Even though I feel like they're real, I'm going to challenge them. Like this idea that I'm going to make a fool of myself. I don't know that to be true. Like it hasn't happened yet. What I'm doing here is I'm just fortune telling and catastrophizing. I'm telling myself something that's going to happen that hasn't even happened. And I'm automatically going to the worst case scenario.
You're psyching yourself out to reaffirm that voice. That voice is psyching you out.
Yeah. And then
reaffirming its belief to convince you.
Yeah. And then by the end of it, I just like tell myself, you know what? Objectively, all of these beliefs, they feel right. Like that's me going into my shell. But in this situation, these beliefs aren't helping me and I need to adopt a new mindset. So I'm going to go into this thinking, I'm going to be awesome.
And then did you find a time, can you remember back the time where it sort of clicked over where you didn't have to write it down anymore? You were actually able just to do that math in your head?
I do it in my head. I don't necessarily need to write it out anymore, but like I still work on it to this day. There are some, and albeit not as much, but there are still moments in my life where I need to have that process in my own head. And for me, it's like going to the gym and lifting weights. Like if you stop lifting weights, you're going to see your muscles start to degrade and you're going to start resorting back to your weak self. So I have to keep working on that.
Well, your comfort zone extends.
Yep.
So you might be able to tackle certain challenges or do different things, public speaking, difficult conversation, going and playing footy.
Absolutely.
You know, but then once you master that and get through that, well, okay, well, that's now within my comfort zone.
Yeah.
What's next? So when I do get to something that is outside of that, well, I'll have the same issues. So falling back to that framework, so to speak, to be able to
and the framework is like what some like people, I've heard it called before as a toolbox. So when you're in a hard situation, maybe you haven't completely changed your mindset and you are still having negative thoughts, but that's okay because now you have a toolbox and you open it up and you find the tool for the problem and you fix it. It's different for different people. Like I do know girls who do this who are very good at self-affirming, where they will go in front of the mirror and listen and tell themselves affirmations or listen to
Words of
self-affirmation.
affirmation.
You
that.
are beautiful and you are amazing. And is stunning.
Yeah.
And that is almost exactly what I'm doing on pen and paper.
Just a different
It's
format.
just a different format. And if that's the tool they reach for, then, go for it.
It's like you're tipping the scales against the voice.
Yeah, you're just trying to make it fair.
So the environment factors, you spoke about leadership, and you had a leader that believed in you, and you had people that believed in you. And from a leadership perspective, I think some really great learnings of pushing people out of their comfort zone into their fear zone, where things are, hey, I'm scared. People are going to see what a fraud I am. People are going to know that I'm going to fail. Everyone's watching. Hey, I don't want to do this. This isn't right. Why the hell is this happening? The power of pushing someone and knowing what they're capable of and seeing that is a really great thing for a leader to be able to do. Firstly, to express to them that they believe in them and that they have more capabilities than what they believe. And then secondly, actually throwing them in that deep end and seeing how they go.
Yeah. And I think I've actually done this quite a lot, which is with people who are capable and have potential. One of the easiest ways to get them out of that mindset of, oh, well, I'm never going to do anything, is to just give them a task that they can't fail and just let them have it. And then, or even one thing I love to do, give them something which is so low risk that it doesn't matter if they fail or not. And then just keep affirming them. You're doing a good job. You're doing a good job. Yeah. Because it's not about the job. It's about that change in dialogue in their head.
Rewiring your brain.
Yeah. It's as leaders, it's a hard thing to do because that process takes a lot of time and a lot of investment in a person. But at the end of the day, we'll talk about improving performance and building relationships. This is your bread and butter for improving relationships. It's just being invested in people and people knowing that you're invested in them.
And a long-term view on performance in the fact that you have that opportunity to be able to improve capabilities of people, improve people's lives, improve people's mindsets, and get to a point where that actually has some benefits for your operation or for your team or for whatever that may be. And then that's not necessarily your driving factor. Yeah. It's one of them. Yeah. Obviously, it's what you're there to do. But there's obviously some really great byproducts there for the individual. You were talking about the task doesn't matter. It's about rewiring the brain, right?
Yeah.
It's funny how we from a fitness point of view, hey, you don't run. You're probably a little bit thicker than you would like to be. Hey, I'm going to run 10 kilometers.
Yeah.
And you get up one morning pumped and you set out and you make it 2.
Yeah.
And then that will then reaffirm the fact that you're not good enough. You're not up to it. However, if I just broke it down and just said, hey, look, what's an achievable goal for me? Let's start small. Let's break it down into bite-sized chunks. I'm going to run a kilometer.
Yeah. I think you can go 2 routes to this. I'm going to run 10 kilometers. And both are completely acceptable. The first is the one that you said, just break it down into smaller chunks. And then after every successful attempt, you reaffirm, oh, wow, I did that. I can push it forward. Or I don't think there's, and maybe I'm a little bit crazy here, but I don't think there's a problem with going above and beyond and saying, I'm going to wake up tomorrow and run 10 kilometers and then only run 2 kilometers. I think the trick with doing it this method is having the presence of mind to acknowledge that, I told myself I was going to run 10 kilometers and I only run 2 kilometers. That doesn't make me a bad person
or a failure.
I had a good attempt and I tried what I thought I could do and I just didn't get there. I'm going to try again. And just acknowledging that, hey, I ran the 2Ks. I'm going to try and beat my 2Ks and keep trying till I hit that 10 kilometers. So I think depending on where your mind goes, there are a million different ways where you can set goals and achieve goals. I think it just depends how aware you are and how honest you are in your own dialogue in your head.
It's funny how we do that in our heads. You go from, I'm setting a goal, use the analogy of your 10 kilometers and you only make the 2. So, I achieved 2 kilometers. That's 2 more than I would have done if I didn't set that goal. Yeah. And you can look at that in a positive light. Yeah. As long as you do look at it in a positive light and it doesn't distract you or deter you from doing
Well, here's the interesting thing that I don't think a lot of people realize is that the reason why I'm so like adamant that neither of these are preferable and both of them are fine is that, well, let's look at like what's happened objectively. In both cases, you've run 2 kilometers. The only difference is what you've said in your head. So if you're self-aware enough to go, I said I'd run 10 kilometers, but I only ran 2 kilometers. That's still fine. I'm just going to keep pushing. Well, then like there's nothing wrong with that because you're doing the exact same work that if you'd just run 2 kilometers and said you were going to run 2 kilometers.
And view it from a positive light, which can be really difficult, right? Like you were saying in your scenario, you had 3 or 4 factors that were overriding the one factor that got you going, right? So that can be hard because there's competing factors. So you still got to make a choice that, oh, okay, is it this one? I'm not a failure, or is it, hey, I am a failure? And whatever the voice says goes. So you're right. It does depend on where you're at and where that inner voice is directing you.
Absolutely.
Victim mentality is an interesting one. When you're in a comfort zone or fear zone, you see pop up a little bit where you don't try things. You stick in your comfort zone. You're scared of failing. You don't want to extend yourself.
Yeah.
Which means then your output is limited. Your growth and your learning is limited. However, there's other people you see around you that are actually doing it. Like, why do they get the chance? Why are they doing it? I'm a victim here. Why am I so hard done by?
It just reminds me of this idea of, well, I could have done it if I felt like it, but these reasons are what kept me back. And I think that the victim mentality is just another form of self-affirming. Albeit it's a little bit more toxic because it completely stops you from doing anything. Instead of, I'm going to go do this, you're actually, what I think you're doing is you're reaffirming your ego, which is, I didn't do this, but it's because of these reasons. I think it is the case that there are genuine people in this world who have really good excuses not to perform. But those people are outliers. Most of us fall in what's known as the standard distribution, where we're all plotted in the middle. We all have a good ability to do some things. And the best thing we can do for ourselves is to acknowledge that we have this mentality. And I'm not saying this because I'm like, just get out there and do it. Just do it.
You're just talking from your own experience.
Yeah, I come from this group of people who are like, I am an awesome, smart person who has so many friends. But the reason why I can't do this is because of these reasons. And I acknowledge now that my excuses were just a means to bolster up my own ego and stop me from going, wow, I'm actually not that awesome and I don't have that many friends. I'm not cool. Of course I am now. I got so many friends and I'm super cool.
It's just interesting that, like, I think, we're all guilty of this whole negative approach. I find it with parenting, like, having kids is like, your kids are great because they put you into situations where as a parent, you can send them down a couple of paths and you can vindicate exactly what they're feeling, or you can give them the tools that they need to be able to tackle life and what gets thrown at them in life in the future. So for instance, it's not fair, I didn't get this, and I'm not good enough, and this is that. And you can go, okay, well, it's okay. You're perfect the way you are. Yeah. And what's that going to do? Every time that they get to a point where they're not happy with something, or they're doubting themselves, or they don't feel they're good enough, like they're just reaffirming that that's okay. And that's not your intent as a parent if you were to say something like that, but you can quite easily figure out that could be the outcome instead of, and depending upon what age your kid's at and the relationship you have with them. But it's like, okay, cool. Well, what are you going to do about it? What are you doing next? What's the next steps here?
If we're bringing it back to like leadership and people maybe within a team who have this victim mentality, it's all about finding the right route to persuasion for that person. And it is kind of analogous to what you're talking about in parenting, which is, sometimes you got to approach your children with you got to approach one of your children completely different to how you approach another one of your children. So with some, you need to be more direct. With some, you need to be a little bit more soft. The outcome isn't about getting what you think is right across. It's about changing their mindset.
Well, it's not even probably changing the mindset. And I know that, and I agree with what you're saying, but there's a different level to it, is that you're just applying some pressure in an environment so they can change their mindset. Is
exactly. And yeah, I've dealt with some people before who just, they do react completely differently to how you treat them. And in my world, I look at it and I go, well, why can't you just be more positive like me? Not actually, but sometimes I think, wouldn't it be easier if you could just adopt my mindset right now? But then that's not the goal. The goal is to influence them to change their behavior so that they get a better outcome for themselves. So as a leader, I have to look at that and go, well, my method of doing things may be different to what is going to get this person results. And having that state of mind is insanely hard because it's very frustrating to have to acknowledge that what is working in your own head is not working with this person.
Well, it's just the whole, hey, why can't they see what I see?
Yeah, exactly.
Like it's really obvious. Everyone can see this. Why can't they see that?
Yeah.
And there's a factor in their voice that's saying.
Yeah, and I just think the route to persuasion in this case is not by telling them, why can't you just see what I see? It's like
it's certainly not. But that's the frustration, and that's where the patience comes into it, which can be really hard from a leadership point of view or a parenting point of view, particularly if you're dealing with the same issue over and over again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Your little turtle crossing the road on the Roe Highway, right?
Yeah.
It brings up that point around mindset and how it affects performance and outcomes.
Yeah.
Comfort mind zone goes into their shell. They obviously die.
Yeah.
Or maybe they're lucky and miss. They're not in a good spot, right? They're just treading water. That's where they are. Compared to, okay, yeah, look, everything in my body's telling me not to do it, but hey, I've got to go. I've got to keep going. I know that's my route to survival and continuing on and growing. And that learning and growth zone, and then just the effects that has on performance. Like, our mind is our biggest limiting factor. Like, that's the thing that holds us back. It governs our engine. It stops us from getting and achieving things that we're capable of doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Pushing out of that is that process. And you sort of talk about that 8 years and how you've worked through that. The feeling you get when you're in like a learning and growth zone compared to being in that comfort zone, like that's the other odd data output that is weird when you experience it, right? Like, you're in your comfort zone and you're really just sort of, you're on edge, you're not happy, you're capable of more, but you just don't do it. You're getting told what to do, so to speak. Compared to when you're in your learning and growth zone and you're actually giving it a go, you're just free. Like,
it's completely like night and day. And one of the odd things to like contrast is that in one example, you're pretty much lying to yourself 24/7 and you're unhappy. And then in the other example, you're being honest with yourself and you're really happy. Yeah. And that honesty also means being honest about your flaws as well. So it's very counterintuitive, because what can keep you in the circle of, you're unhappy and you're lying to yourself is that it's going to feel bad that I have to acknowledge these flaws of mine. But actually, the only way to move forward is to acknowledge the flaws. And I know it's cliche and it's easier said than done. And in our own minds, sometimes we tell ourselves, I'm not biased towards myself and I acknowledge all my flaws. But if you're the sort of person who tells yourself that, the chances are you aren't acknowledging all your flaws, because one of the flaws of being human is having biases and, having these self-affirming behaviors and defense mechanisms to protect yourself. I have to always remind myself that I always want to keep myself in a happy spot and in a safe spot. And sometimes that's going to stop me from growing. And if I keep having the same negative thoughts over and over again, here's another analogy you might like. I definitely stole this one. I don't know who to credit to, though. If we think about your brain as a paddock of grass, and we're people who are trying to get from one end of the paddock to the other end of the paddock. Let's say that you go from part A in the paddock to part B. And negative talk, you give yourself so much negative talk that you're going from one thought to one outcome all the time. You're going to start clearing a path in the paddock. You're going to start clumping down the grass. There's going to be this easy as path for you to walk every time. You need to get from point A to point B. So over time, the grass just stops growing there. And every time a situation comes your way, you just walk that path, and it's the negative path. You just go, I'm not good enough. I can't do it. I'm poor and stupid, whatever.
Yeah.
The hard part about changing your attitude from negative to positive is that you have to walk a completely new path in your brain, and you have to start from scratch and stomp down the grass.
Go through the bushes.
Yeah, and you've got to let that old path grow up, and you've got to stomp down this new path. And it's not easy. You're going to always want to take that old negative path where it's just so easy to walk. But then you've got to catch yourself in the moment and go, no, I need to go through the tall grass, because one day this will be my path. Yeah. And you just do it over and over again. And then one day, without even realizing it, you go, oh my God, I haven't had
autopilot.
I haven't had this negative thought in 6 months, and I didn't even realize it. Yeah. Because all of a sudden, that old path that you used to walk is all now grown over, and no one uses it anymore.
I like that one, Scotty.
Yeah. Look, I've stolen that one, and I don't know who to give credit to, but
it's a good one for rewiring your brain.
Yeah, absolutely.
A new circuitry within your mind.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm absolutely committed to that process, and I'm someone who's who's seen it happen live, not only in myself, but I've seen it happen in other people as well. And it's a beautiful thing to witness, that you get to see someone who could have lived their whole lives in one state of mind, thinking this, this script about themselves, that they were this sort of person. And then in the space of a year, they now have this new script of themselves, that I am capable and I can do this. And then they are now going to live a completely different life based on a little bit of work that you've done with them.
Yeah, it's really nice. That empathy, right?
Yeah.
Because let's call it short-term empathy and long-term empathy. Because leaders who are seen to push people out of their comfort zone, make them uncomfortable, extend their limits, can be seen as heartless. Hey, you're pushing someone into something they don't want to do or they don't like to do, right? That is not nice. However, from a long-term view, it's the most empathetic thing you could ever do for someone. They can live a life without having regrets. They'll be able to extend themselves and do different things, compared to the other version where, hey, no, you just stay in your comfort zone. It's all okay. You're perfect the way you are. You just keep going. And yes, it's not you. It's just how, these are the cards that you're being dealt, right? Yeah. In the short term, okay, they feel good for 10 minutes, but they know it's a lie.
Yeah.
And
look, I think I won't differentiate between short-term and long-term empathy, because I think the whole point of empathy is that whatever you feel in the moment towards someone is your degree of empathy. So if you feel sorry for someone in the moment, you can feel sorry for someone in the moment, and maybe that is your empathy. Like, you feel sorry for them because of their situation. You don't necessarily have to want to improve their situation. I think that's something beyond empathy, because I think empathy is just about putting yourself in that person in the moment and using your mechanics and going, I understand how you feel. I think the next step is how much you want to alleviate how that person feels. And I think this is where you can go into short-term and long-term, because if you empathize with that person and you acknowledge how they feel, well, then you can decide, I know how to alleviate this person, or I suspect I know how to alleviate this person's suffering. And it's going to be a hard slug, and I can't adopt this approach. I need to adopt this approach. And I think that skill is something that's hard to come by. And the best leaders I've ever had have got that skill of acknowledging that. And they don't even have to democratize it like I do with words. They just instinctively know it.
It's their motive within the team.
Yeah, exactly.
Investing in the team. Like, from a sporting point of view, sports coaches use it a lot. And I remember a situation, and it's not unusual, and there'll be lots of people that have been involved in sports that have had this said to them, or coaches who have said it, but just the simple thing of some tough love in regards to, hey, you might be going through something and you got a coach yelling at you, just writing, you're like, what the hell's going on? You should be doing this. Why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing that? And I've been in that situation, right? And then at the end of it, you're just going, oh, they're picking on me or they're calling me out because I'm not doing it, and they've seen that and they know that I'm not capable. But then you actually have the coach come up to you afterwards and just say to you quietly, hey, if you notice that I was pushing you, that's exactly what I'm trying to do. I believe that you're better than what you are and what you're settling for. And the day that I stop pulling you up or stop giving you feedback to improve is the day that I've given up on you.
Stop caring. Yeah.
There's two ways to look at it. You could very much go back into that victim mentality as, oh, he's rude. Why is he doing this? This isn't right. This isn't fair. But it comes from a place of empathy, is that, hey, I want that person to fulfill what they're capable of and what they're able to achieve.
Yeah.
Different ways to, pull yourself out of the comfort zone or a fear zone where you're stuck in this mindset where you don't want to extend yourself. We spoke about environmental factors and the people you surround yourself, which are really, really important, because that can be hard when you're around someone who's super negative.
Yeah.
Like, you're going to fall to that level. But then other things that I've sort of found that have helped me, like anything that you can get to a point where, hey, you're within a comfort zone, and physical challenges are cool. Little ones, and you hear lots about them now, whether it be ice baths, whether it be cold showers, all right? Those two things. And you might go, oh, okay, well, what's that got to do with, mindset? Well, everything in your brain is telling you, hey, do not have a cold shower. Have a warm shower. It's right there. Why would you not do it? And, your grass in the paddock analogy that you created is exactly that. You're just trying to remow a new path there. You're trying to fight back against it. So you're building a habit so you're able to, when there is the time where you need to be out of your comfort zone and push yourself, you can, because you've got that experience, that muscle memory, you've done the reps, and you've actually developed that skill.
I don't do ice baths anymore, but I stand by the fact that I was so happy that I could put myself in an uncomfortable position that wasn't doing me harm, albeit, maybe it wasn't doing me benefit either, but it wasn't something that my body wanted to do. But I went, you know what, you're going to do it anyway.
Yeah, I'm in control here. Yeah. Sleeping on the floor instead of in a bed, sleeping under the stars is a nice one. Don't go camping in your $100,000 caravan and do all that sort of stuff. Actually, just take a sleeping bag and go sleep under the stars and see what happens.
Yeah.
Like, I find it with my kids is that my kids have other kids come over and, hey, we want to sleep outside. Yeah. And it's like, what? Why would you want to do that for? Like, what are you thinking?
You and I are so different here, because I would never sleep on the. I think stoicism would say, I sleep on a pallet or something. But I'm like, nah, I slept on the floor for a long time. It hurt my back.
I don't think it's I think there's a reason for beds. Don't get me wrong, right? And there's a reason for hot water.
Yeah.
But being able to control that and showing that you can control it, I think there's so much benefits. And it's personally, again, like I don't come from a academic, that's science back. I come from a doing and a practical point of view. I just know that that's helped me.
Yeah.
Is that has extended my abilities to be able to push outside of my comfort zone. I can quite easily see the reasons for that. Running longer distances, physical challenges. You see so many of them. There's certainly the physical benefits of it, but the psychological benefits are really powerful and I think get understated. Like the 75 hard, the David Goggins, what is it, 5 miles in...
No, 4x4x4.
Yeah.
I do participate.
Yeah, Murph challenge, doing different workouts like that. There's so many different things that you can actually do where that voice is screaming at you going, you're an idiot. What are you doing? Don't do it. And even during it, don't do it. You're an idiot. Stop. Why are you even doing this? What's the point? Again, you just, you're mowing that new path.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Look, mindsets it's a huge field, and there are there's books, there's podcasts, there's all this stuff on how you can change your mindset. But I think it all starts in your own head of what you think will work for you, acknowledging your faults, acknowledging when you're being overly negative, challenging your overly negative beliefs, and working from there. If you feel like it's too cringe to go into the world of delusion and just self-affirm and go, you're awesome and you're strong, well, then you don't have to do that. You can look at things objectively and
find what works for you.
Yeah, well, not just find what works for you, but if you look at things objectively and look at your negative thoughts and see if they're actually there's evidence to support them or not. If you can do that, and that's a brilliant way to be objective about who you really are as a person.
And the benefits just from a leadership point of view and the responsibility, if you're trying to improve capability within your team that you have and need to be mindful of, in the fact that you are pushing people into situations that they've got a habit that they've had for years and years and years. And there may be some really profound and serious sort of situations that have led them to have that type of mindset. But being aware of that, but then still working with them and understanding exactly the right ways to, push them into some uncomfortable but achievable sort of situations so they can grow and so they are able to improve is an important thing. And I certainly see it as a responsibility
absolutely.
for your team.
Cool. No, it was a good chat, Dan.
Appreciate your time, Scotty. Appreciate you sharing all your sort of stuff.
Always oversharer. That's chronically.
Yeah.
I'll see you next time.
See you, buddy.